This fire is the dopest thing I've seen.
It's a fireside chat.
It's a fireside chat.
I feel like, when it goes out, people get upset, and I have to reset it.
That's like, yeah, that's amazing.
So, anyway, I just want to say you are a superhero, and every superhero has their origin story. What's your origin story?
Oh my gosh, so first of all, thank you for inviting me to be here and to speak to Startup Grind in Sacramento. Second of all, for the people, those of you who have not been to this before, Rich, I just met him recently, but he's an amazing connector, amazing connector, so make sure you take advantage of all the things that he's got going on. And third, again, if you haven't been here before, my hope with this chat is to tell you all the shit that nobody else is willing to tell you, right? So if I'm not touching on something, somebody stop me and say like, no, give it to me straight, give me the real story, because I'm happy to tell you. And I think that not enough people tell the true hardship of not just entrepreneurship, but raising money and what it takes and what success looks like and all of those other things. So thanks for being here, and I'm excited to share my story with you.
So, origin story, radioactive spider? Or,
So my origin story is actually relatively simple. So you all are from Sacramento, so it's easier to tell you what Fresno is like, that's where I'm from, than it is when I'm traveling across the country and telling my story, because you have to really paint a picture for what the Central Valley or the middle of California really looks like. And so what a lot of people don't know is that California is not all palm trees and guns. It's not all Hollywood, right? And so you have to kind of paint that picture. And so growing up in the Central Valley and telling that story elsewhere, the first thing I have to tell people is that my region, where I grew up, is responsible for between 20 and 30% of the world's food, right? So agriculture is our driving industry there, which means that you have this sort of system where I grew up, where you either work on a farm or you own a farm. And I come from a family that works on farms, right? So I grew up in the fields of Central California. I got my first job when I was 6 years old, rolling raisins under the sun, and kind of serendipitously went through this series of events where I sort of accidentally went to college. It's not a joke. I accidentally became a computer engineer. I accidentally became an entrepreneur, and then I accidentally started a company that raised $27 million. And the reason that I'm saying accidentally so intentionally is because none of those things were part of my vision for my life, right? I was not 6 years old rolling raisins thinking to myself, man, matter of time before I raise a couple million. Matter of time, right? That's not what I was thinking to myself. So I think that is a helpful lens for the stories that you'll hear tonight, is that none of this was on purpose, but you did it anyway.
So what did you, what did little 6-year-old Irma really see for herself?
Yeah, I think I saw for myself what a lot of people see for themselves when they grow up in the fields, is that there's going to be more fields, right? It's going to be hot. And dirty. And I thought I was going to do what my family did. I thought that I would be a field laborer for most of my life. But what success looked like for us and for the people of my community was being able to pay all of your bills in the same month, right? So to not trade your PG&E bill for your car payment, for your rent, for your groceries. And so the way out of that for people who grew up in my region and similar rural towns is to get a job at the Ace Hardware or the Subway or the Chevron or whatever your sort of local big name company is, and then climb the corporate ladder until you're a manager at that place. And that's what success looks like. You get to pay all of your bills in the same month. So that's what I thought my life would be.
Okay, so how does one accidentally go to college? Because I want my kids to accidentally go to college too.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny, but it's also tragic, right? And I'm not trying to tell you a sad story. I'm like, this is the way that most of Americans grow up. It's really not uncommon for people to live out this life. What's different about my story is the outcome, right? So I accidentally went to college. This is not a joke. And if anyone in the room has kids, I'm not trying to give career advice, okay? Let's just establish that from the start. But there was a moment in time, I was 15 or 16 years old, and I heard over the PA system that if you wanted to sit for the PSAT, that you should go to the cafeteria. And I didn't know what the PSAT was, because that wasn't important to my life at the time. But my 15-year-old brain heard that I could get out of class for half a day if I went to the cafeteria. And then I went to college. I mean, there were a couple of intervening steps, but ultimately, what ended up happening is that marketing mail from colleges started arriving at my house, and among that mail ended up being a couple of scholarship offers. So I was a pretty good student. I learned really early that if I'm quiet and I don't bother anyone and I do my homework, I get beat up a lot less. So I was a pretty good student and I worked at that. And when I took the PSAT, I got a really good score. And I ended up going to school at the University of Toledo in Ohio on a full academic scholarship. But that was not really part of my plan at all. And honestly, if somebody else hadn't paid for it, it never ever would have happened.
All right, so this leads back the next question. How did you accidentally go into computer science?
Yeah, so this is a good one. This is nobody believes me when I tell the story, but I swear to you it's 100% true. So I take a Greyhound bus from Fresno, California, which is about 3 hours south of where we sit right now. So I take a Greyhound bus from Fresno, California to Toledo, Ohio, which is something like 2,500 miles on a bus, which is not that fun. Okay? It's not an amazing experience, but you do it, right? So I get off the bus, and I'm filthy because it takes 4 days to get to Ohio on a bus. And I've got my backpack, and I'm ready for school, and you had to go to orientation if you wanted to register for classes, and you had to physically be present. It's not the case anymore. Do you know kids can sign up for classes without physically being there? What the hell, internet? So I get to Ohio, I go to my orientation, and the woman behind the desk, she says, okay, it's time for you to declare a major. And I'm like, yeah, totally, what's that? And she was like, the thing you're gonna study while you're here with us. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, what are my options? And she's like, why don't you take this catalog and go sit in this chair. She had pity on me, and she was really, really sweet. But she says, go sit in this chair over here, take this catalog, and then look through the offerings, and then you declare a major, and then you can change it later if you really, really need to. And so I did. I took the catalog, I sat over there, I'm flipping through it, and there was this beautiful building. Some super rich family had given a bunch of money to the school. They built a glass building, and they named it Nitschke Hall after the family. And I thought to myself, I'm 17 years old, I'm brand new to Ohio, I'm coming from Fresno, California, I'm a little bit shell-shocked, I'm also filthy. And I'm thinking to myself, damn, how cool would it be to take classes in a glass building? And so that's the story of how I became a computer engineer. So I was in college of engineering, I'm not even kidding, that's how I chose my major. And so that's I feel like you're just disappointed in me right now.
I'm still waiting for reality to read my own spider. Okay, so going through your LinkedIn, you started at 4 companies, but they all seem very related. You had I think it was hashtag Sacramento, edit, and Code 59 or 59 Days of Coding or something.
Yeah. So I don't know exactly what's listed on LinkedIn today, but I can tell you those are only the success stories. The number is closer to 14, and those didn't make it. The other 10 didn't make it. So there's a lesson in that about what you put on LinkedIn, I guess. So the long story short is that I have a dual degree in computer science and computer engineering. I spent 6 years of my life being the dumbest kid in class. It was awful, and it was a grind, and it was really, really, really hard. But I made it by the skin of my teeth, and now I hold these degrees, and I'm an engineer. And it was also the most rewarding experience of my life to have to be in this position where you are so far behind the starting line, and all of these kids around you, these 11-year-olds have been building computers in their mom's basements. And the first time you use email is at your orientation, you're a little bit behind, okay? So I spend these 6 years, and I get my degree, but ultimately, my dad dies when I'm in college, and so I'm a Mexican-American, and our family is very, very tightly packed together. There's always cousins around. You never know if there's going to be an aunt laying on the floor in the morning, or a cousin sleeping on the couch. You just don't know, right? So when my dad dies, I'm immediately of course I have to go home. I'm going to go back. I'm going to contribute to the family. This is just what Latinas do, right? And so I did. But what you don't really think about at that moment in time is that that's legitimately starting over. Right? So all of my network I had built in the Midwest, all of my job offers were on the East Coast, all of my connections were somewhere else, and so I moved back to California, and I'm 24 years old, and I'm damn it, technology has changed my life completely. I watched it transform entire cities, and so I come back and I'm what am I going to do with all of this? What am I going to do with all this technology stuff? I grew up in the fields of Central California, it's not exactly like, it's not an easy connection between that and computer science and engineering, right? So what am I going to do now? And so that ultimately is what started me down this path of entrepreneurship. It was like, if technology is changing the face of these other economies in these other places, doesn't it make sense that it can do those same things here in Fresno, California? And that was the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey. Just had to ask myself, well, what's missing and what can I start today?
So, like, I'm surprised that, a few hours away, you could have easily gotten a job in Silicon Valley, but you chose to stay and try to make a business. But it seems like it was more than a business in Fresno. It seemed to be more like a calling of sorts to you.
Yeah, I think that's exactly very similar to yourself, right? So I think when I think about what's the highest and best version of my career, like it's really easy to think like, oh, I want to be the CTO of something or the CEO of something, or I want to work for Google, and that's great. But I think when you grow up the way that I did, really you're looking for something much deeper than that. It's really a matter of, if I can succeed and I can pull my entire community with me, like that's the best version of my career. So that's what I wanted to do at Fresno, is figure out a way to take these really non-traditional people in this super non-traditional place and prove to the world that we could be this technology center of global importance, where the technology workforce is legitimately reflective of the people of the county, so that we don't face what we face in places like the Silicon Valley, where there isn't really diversity or inclusion in that place. I mean, we talk about it, and people are making a true effort, but in a place like Fresno, it's built into the fabric, and you don't have to inherit that. So I was really interested in building my career there.
Okay, so I'm going to start with Bitwise. First off, what is Bitwise? Tell us, give everyone, I think there's a bunch of people, including myself, that would like to see what Bitwise is.
Yeah, it's kind of a fun story to tell. So Bitwise is a complicated business because for a number of reasons. First of all, we never say no. That's a problem. But when you think about a place like Fresno, or what we characterize as underdog cities, it's really not implicit that some other technology company is going to come alongside and do the thing that you're not doing, which is the case in the Silicon Valley, right? So if you start an app company, let's say in the Silicon Valley, someone somewhere in that city is starting the technology education program that's going to like be your future workforce. That's not the case in Fresno or Bakersfield and maybe even Sacramento, right? And so we started a company in 2013 with the singular goal of wanting to fix our city. And we asked ourselves, what is it going to take? Like, what are the missing pieces between what exists today and what we can create to start a technology company that can fix our city? And there were three things that sort of rushed into view. The first one is technology education. How do you enter into the technology industry? If you're the son or daughter of a migrant farm worker, how do you become a computer programmer and achieve agency in this industry? The second thing is a sense of place. These beautiful spaces, we didn't build them in Fresno. They didn't exist, right? So creating that sense of place, which you plant a flag in the ground and say, if you're going to do technology, this is where you come, this is where you can be good at it. And then the third thing that we do is we build software projects and software product companies. And JP is going to tell you a little bit about that later. But those are the three things that we do, and they may sound disparate. They might sound like separate things, but when you take them all together and you cause them to feed one another, what you get is this really fast spinning wheel, this ecosystem solution, where the people who are traditionally left out in the most exciting segments of our economy are finally invited to it, again, so that technology workforce is representative of the people of our county.
So, what's been really in the press recently is you raised a $27 million in Series A. And when I met you a few weeks ago, I think I was like, holy crap, you're not male, you're not white, and you're not from Stanford. And you did something quite, even if you were all those three, that would have been an amazing function. So, and I just, a good friend of mine, she had a startup and she was trying to raise money in Silicon Valley, and I think she did it for like a good year, and then she finally just shut down and joined another startup. But, what was this, first off, like, what was this process of getting that Series A? That seems like such a daunting task for any startup.
Yeah, that's really, so you're very observant. I'm not male or white. That's 100% true. So quickly then, show of hands, who knows what a Series A is? Okay, so that's actually a good bit of the room. You were ahead of me when we started down this path. I actually Googled what a Series A was when we began down this road. Well, this is how it came to be. Like, I'm sitting there with my co-founders and our executive team, and we're about 4.5 years into the business now. So this is right around mid-2017. And we're asking ourselves, what are we going to do next? Like, what does the next iteration of Bitwise really look like? And are we doing a good job, and are any of the things working? And by that moment in time, like, things had really started working. We were in something like 150,000 square feet of commercial real estate downtown Fresno. We had trained something like 2,500 students. We had created like 1,000 new jobs. And so it was really starting to have a meaningful impact on the city. And so the next version of Bitwise was to do much, much more of that, right? Was to take the things that were working and really pour on. But then we asked ourselves, like, if it works here in Fresno, which is one of the most broken cities in the United States, 4 of the 10 poorest zip codes in California are in my county. 1 in 4 of our people live in poverty. 33% of the people who go to college don't end up in job. I'm sorry, 80% of the people who go to college don't end up in jobs to which their degrees are attached. We are one of the least educated counties in the United States, and on and on and on, right? So it's a very, very broken place. But if what we're doing can work in a place like Fresno, can it work in the rest of America? Can it work in a place like Sacramento or Bakersfield or what you might characterize as an underdog city? If you took our model to non-primary markets, would it work there? So those were the questions that we were asking ourselves. And then we realized, like, 'twas ever thus, our dreams are more expensive than what's in the bank account. And I hope that's always the case, but it's a weird tension to live in when you think, like, if I can double what we're doing, or if I can quadruple what we're doing, how am I gonna pay for that? And so that's when we discovered venture capital. And there was a lot of nights spent Googling what venture capital did and what it meant, and how you raised it, and those types of things. We got to work networking ourselves in the Bay Area, right? So one of the best parts about building a global technology center in the middle of Central California is that, like, you get to start from scratch and nobody knows who you are, and you get to sort of develop your own culture. But one of the worst parts of building a global technology center in the center of California is that nobody knows who you are and they don't get to inherit anything. Like, you're starting from scratch, right? So the very, very first step for us in raising money was to go introduce ourselves. And so we did exactly that. We went and, like, literally knocked on doors. And we would ask, like, a mother's, cousin's, sister's, gardener's, dog groomer, like, do you know anyone in venture? And would you be willing to introduce us? And we would take literally any meeting that came with a business card. It did not matter. Like, it would, any meeting, any hour, day or night, and just pounded the
So
table.
how many pitches do you think you did?
Thousands.
Literally thousands?
Thousands. Do you know how many no's? Do you know how much rejection I've experienced in the last 2 years? You guys, it's amazing. Yeah, it'll take its toll, for real.
You just gotta take to get that one yes, a big yes.
Yeah, I think what it really came down to, so one of the things you learn when you're pitching.
Okay, actually, can you give us your 30-second pitch? You know, we're all VCs in an elevator.
Yeah.
What was your 30-second pitch for Bitwise?
Bitwise is going to change the face of the technology industry such that you'll be famous.
Oh.
And that was it. Like, it really is about them. That's one of the things that's a tip for you, is that your pitch, it's not about your company. It's about what the VC is going to get out of your company.
Okay.
It's a small change, but it's fundamental to everything. Why does it matter? We're going to change the face of the technology industry. Nobody's looking where we're looking. You're going to be on the bleeding edge of everything.
So and actually, did you ever meet Bill Record?
Yep.
So he has this thing like getting the wow. So that 30-second pitch is for them to ask you ask the following questions primarily. Is that?
Yeah. So show of hands. Anybody raised VC before? A little bit. Okay. So one of the things that I find super interesting is that the cadence of meetings doesn't actually go the way that is described on Twitter or in the TED Talks. Like that's not actually how it worked for us. So it wasn't 30 seconds to win 5 minutes, to win the 15 minutes, to win the 30 minutes. Like, that's not how it worked for us at all. It was literally the job of triangulating the introduction. So if I could meet Mohammed, and Mohammed is a friends and pals with Elijah, and also with Celeste, I need to get Elijah and Celeste to contact Mohammed on my behalf to take my meeting. and then I get 30 minutes, right? So I'm not building up 35 and 30 seconds, 5 minutes, 30 minutes. It was if I could find other points of light outside of my universe, but that are in his universe, then I win the 30 minutes from the beginning.
So, I guess, now that, how long from the beginning of this journey to you got close the series A, how long did that take?
It's like you're making me relive bad dreams. So we didn't know anything about raising venture dollars, and we thought it would take us 6 months, which is what everyone tells you it will take. And it took us almost 18 months, which was a really, really long time.
So
I aged like 50 years.
So, what are some lessons you learned through that journey that, if you had to redo it all over again, that you would do, or maybe you needed to do that because it got you to where you got?
Yeah, I think one of the things, so there's this study, and if I'm too wordy, just cut me off.
No, we're wrong here.
There's this study, there's actually a series of studies, it's called Bridges Out of Poverty. It's really, really neat if you have the time to pick it up. But there's this anecdote in that study that says, like, it takes a person from another class, like a socioeconomic class above you, to guide you into that class, right? And so there's an example of that they give that really resonates with me, and that is this, that if somebody in my family dies, right, from a low, we're on a sort of a low socioeconomic run, somebody from my family dies, God forbid, it's totally reasonable and acceptable to bring a lasagna to the wake, right? You bring food to the wake or to a person's house after a family member dies. But if somebody from an upper or middle class family dies, and you bring a lasagna to that event, you kind of signaled that you don't know how the rules of that class work because it's most likely catered, right? And that's what raising venture ultimately felt like. I felt like I was always bringing a lasagna, right? And so, and the reason I say that is this, like, it's completely acceptable in the within minutes of knowing somebody, hi, my name's Irma, Bitwise is amazing, you should invest. And then it's a completely acceptable thing to say, and do you write this size of check? Is this the kind of check you want to write? Like, does this fall into your funding thesis? Do you know how weird it is to talk about money? Like, when you grow up the way that I did, that's not shit you do. It would be like walking up to a person and be like, hey, good to meet you. How much do you make every year? Does that come with benefits? Like, that's weird, right? Like, but that in the venture world, it's part of the expectation that you get to that information really, really quickly. Because if you don't write the size of check that I'm looking for, and it doesn't fall under your funding thesis, then there's no reason for us to be having this conversation. We're not going to be friends, right? I don't need to convince you that I'm amazing. We didn't learn that for like 8 months. And so we spent like 8 months having all of the wrong conversations with people who couldn't. My mom used to say, don't take a no from somebody who can't give you a yes in the first place. I see a bunch of nods. Yeah, my mom's hella wise. But we were getting a bunch of no's from people who couldn't have given us a yes in the first place, and we were just spending meeting after meeting, like these hours after hours, all of this travel time, getting these no's from people who weren't going to write the effing check. And so I think if I could go back, and when I do go out to raise again, like that'll be one of the first things out of my mouth is like, do you write the size of check and does this fall under your funding thesis?
Okay, so the one thing that I found just amazing is that on the surface, you do technical training. Lots of people do technical training. On the surface, you have development company, you have development team. Lots of people have development team. How were you able to break through and get to where you wanted to be?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. So a couple of things. We do the 3 things that I described before. We teach people to code, we build interesting spaces, we build software in software companies. There's an analog to that for everywhere, right? We're not the only people who teach people how to code. We didn't find a new and better way to teach JavaScript such that you absorb it faster. That's not our secret sauce, right? Our secret sauce are a couple of things. The first thing is that the talent crisis in the technology industry is massive today. Right this moment in time, there are 80,000 technology jobs that are empty in the state of California right this second. Which means that if we graduated all the CS majors and every dev boot camp in California doubled what they were doing, we still wouldn't have enough people in technology to fill those jobs, right? So, where are we going to look? Because I can tell you that the Silicon Valley is not solving that problem for us. They're not producing more talent, they're just fighting over the same talent. So where are you going to look for new talent that we know we need, because the technology industry is not going anywhere? It's not going to be the Silicon Valley, it's not going to be Boston or Portland or Austin, it's going to be places like Sacramento, it's going to be Fresno, it's going to be Bakersfield, it's going to be El Paso. It's going to be these people who haven't been invited to the technology industry before, who finally activate and start contributing in meaningful ways such that software and technology solve the problems of the world, right? So when you say that to a VC, and you say, plus I've grown 4,000% in the last 4 years, it's their attention.
4,000. So after your 8 months of, like, let's just say it's your training period of raising funds, how did you end up getting to the right person, the right pitch to the right person? What was that process like?
Yeah, so awful is the answer. It's a terrible experience. So we actually went out really early, and in the process of raising, it kind of goes like this. Like, you go, you pitch, you ask if you're going to write the right size check, they say yes or no, then there's this whole process of valuing or evaluation, right, where they value your company, and then there's a term sheet presented. And the term sheet is essentially led by somebody. There's like somebody who's saying, I'm going to put in the bulk of the cash in this round, and you just need to go fill out the back half of the round. So if you're raising $5 million, let's say, and somebody says, I'm going to be your lead investor, I'm putting in $3 million, then my job now is to go and find the other $2 million, right, from other VCs who are willing to follow on. And so we went out, and very early we had a handful of term sheets in our hands, because it was just, I think people were just kind of impressed with what we were doing and the way in which we were doing it and our statistics and stuff like that. But what we didn't know at the time is that we were circling the hoop with like the wrong partners at the table. They didn't care about what we cared about, right? And what we care about is human potential. It's activating that human being, once again, who isn't normally invited to the table. And we spent so much time and energy trying to close the round on the wrong term sheet, right? And so that's why I say it was awful, because when we finally did close, when we finally said, okay, this is going to be the round and this is how it's going to be comprised of X, Y, and Z actors, like, we noticed an immediate difference with the partners who were at the table, and that they wanted to go to work for us to advance the business, right? And that, like, when it comes to like who do you choose and how do you know if you have the right partner, is that they don't wait. They open their Rolodex right up and they're like, hey, you need a chief marketing officer, let me introduce you to 10 people. You need to land a new contract, let's go talk to my friend Joe, right? Like, it's that kind of relationship that you're looking for. And so we spent, if it took us 18 months to close, we spent 16 months roughly, circling the hoop with partners who weren't going to work. And in that final hour, at the 11th hour, when we were like, are we even any good at this? Like, should we just start again? Like, we had somebody come to the table and said, like, all of that other shit you've been doing, waste of time. Let me really help you with the things that you care about, and I'm going to pour on so hard and fast that you're going to feel like you can't keep up with me. We closed the round at 27 million and made that announcement, and it's been life-changing ever since.
And you're definitely going to make a difference for a lot of people. So there's a couple other interesting stories that I heard from you, and I'll ask you. You talked to Martini about you actually hired a Marine that had some troubles. Can you tell us about that story?
Yeah, so we couple of things, I guess. We are a veteran-friendly company. We believe deeply that these folks have skills that they have learned, and very often in transition have a hard time kind of figuring out what to do with their hands. And we have seen over and over again that there isn't very often like a soft place to land where they can kind of figure that out. And so we had a person come directly out of the Marine Corps. He had done 2 tours in Afghanistan and moved from North Carolina to California to take our job. And he shows up on day 1, and we're like, this is perfect. This guy is going to be nails. He's got his shirt tucked in. His hair is combed. His teeth are white, like the whole thing. And we're a very young company at the time, so we didn't really know what to look for in salespeople. But clean cut was definitely the top of the list. And his name is Miguel, and I was like, Miguel, welcome. Here's your flyer. Go sell some software. And he's been like, 5 months, he sold exactly $0. And it was just the most like tragic thing to watch because he showed up every single day completely like he was the Kool-Aid man. He was gonna bust through every door with a big old smile on his face, a complete mess, and sold exactly $0. And then like the lesson though there was that he showed up every day as excited as he was the day before, even though he had failed completely. And it took a while for us to like kind of figure out where he was gonna land. But 5 years into working with him, he sort of started advancing. He became our front desk administrator, and he ran our QuickBooks, and he was our gardener for a second. And like, you're a startup, so you don't ever do one thing, right? And then he became a project manager, and you start to see like all of these skills that he learned in the military start to really kind of come to life, and you're like, oh damn, this guy's for real. He can do more than garden for sure. And he grew up from that into like a leader of the project managers, and then on and on. And so 5 years into it now, he runs one of our most advanced startup companies, one of our portfolio companies called OrderSlip, and he manages a team of 15 all by himself. He's our it's called product officer, but it's sort of an interim CEO, and they're about to go raise their first round of capital in January. So yeah, so just a story of resilience and how like, man, the right people are going to land on their feet, but it's going to take them a minute sometimes to figure out exactly where they need to be. And I think that it's on us, the rest of us, to kind of create the place where they get to do that.
Okay, so that's an interesting. Talk about your. I think I heard about this a little bit, but how many of these what do you call it? Portfolio companies. Are they something that was started within, or are there people that came and pitched you and then you developed it?
Yeah, no. So here's what happens when you don't have any money. You get really economical really fast. Like you learn the most efficient way to like vet an idea and figure out how to spend the least amount of cash figuring out whether or not that thing has a product market fit, right? And so we developed an entire system. It's called our research and development platform. That what it does is it takes a product idea and then it vets it using a very specific formula that we developed in the last 2 years or so. And that process has spit out post-revenue companies, right? So right now we're doing a clip of 1 every 6 months. So we've spit out.
So these are all internal, like your employees got this idea.
Yeah, well, I mean, really, it's JP who does the ideas. So no, but really, the way that it works is what we observe in the field when we are. So Shift3 Technologies, who's here tonight, we build custom software. It's usually a one-off situation, right? It's usually like this very custom thing that a company needs. But what happens sometimes is that you'll get the very similar request 10 times in a row, 20 times in a row. And so you have to ask yourself, can you build it one time and commercialize that project on a subscription basis, or do you really need to build it 10 or 20 times? And so because we have people like JP out in the field, he gets to observe what's happening in all of these different places and say like, hey, if you build that one time, there are 10 people who want it. We should check to see if that's really a product company. And so that's the way that it works.
Okay, that's great. So, what are the next Fresnos in your mind?
It's a loaded question. If I don't say Sacramento, am I going to get it?
Well, Cynthia, I'll hear you now. It's fair. I mean, we're actually doing okay, and we're probably better than Fresno was. So
Dang! Did you guys hear that?
So, there's a lot of places that are, worse off than us. So, and I'm actually wondering if are you looking for a place more, we're fairly advanced, I guess. We're not Silicon Valley, we have our own environment. So we'd love you to be here. Cynthia, thank you.
I actually walked straight back. I needed to take the call, but it can wait. So, conversation, yes, we totally want you to expand.
So she
here,
might.
And I can help.
We're watching this really big, scary guy.
He's a great, really big, scary guy. A very scary, hairy goal of making this place. Not only, we really see so much potential in the assets that we have from a grassroots standpoint, from a corporate standpoint, with many things that can be exploited to bring in everyone to be able to work on cool stuff. And that's really what we want to do.
And Barry is very passionate. It's scary, but he's very passionate.
Absolutely. No, we really it's a region that has talent, that has education, access to education, and a geographically blessed location.
Yeah.
So we really, really need to take it to the next level.
But let's put it in, what are some possible new Fresnos?
Yeah.
So, let's put it that way.
So first of all, scary I can do. Did you not hear my story about Greyhound? That's all I'm saying. So first of all, like Sacramento is already poised to do really cool stuff. The fact that you all are here in this room tonight is evidence of that. So don't make no mistake, you actually are ahead of the game in terms of like where a lot of cities are. And not just Sacramento, but like greater Sacramento too, right? Rockland and like the surrounding areas, like don't discount any of that. You guys have some cool shit happening. And so every time we come up here, it's like exciting to see because we're like, yeah, there's like so much familiar storylines happening between what you guys are working on and what we're working on. But to answer your question, I think that what we're really looking for is like, where can we have the most profound, deepest impact? Where can a Bitwise create the biggest delta? And so we're looking for places that are more broken than Sacramento, to be honest. We're looking for places that, where the economy is maybe aging or dying and people need to reskill into other jobs. We're looking for represented populations that could really use the lift, right, and be invited to the technology industry in a way that they probably haven't been before. And looking for places where a density of person can create sort of that buzz of excitement, right, that sort of self-perpetuating buzz of excitement. And so Sacramento has one of those three. But honestly, like, you don't need a Bitwise. We're happy to be here as partners in the technology space where we build a bunch of software. But the stuff that Rich is doing, that Cynthia's doing, that James is doing, that Andrew is doing, like all of those things, like you're already headed in the right direction. And so we are really just happy to come and high five and like share stories. But you've got it going on already.
What about Stockton?
Stockton is a really interesting place for us. Stockton and Modesto both are really interesting places for us in terms of like, they meet the criteria for what we might be looking for where we could be an assist.
So with that, I'm going to open up to questions from the audience.
Yeah, make it good.
I'm going to play I'm going to say Phil Donahue, but people don't know who that is.
I don't know.
Just really quick, you were saying about how we need more people in the tech field. So what are the top three? I would say I would like top five, at least the top three that you feel are neglected and that we need to have more of.
Yeah, so good question. Did everybody hear the question? Yep. Okay, so in terms of the top three jobs that are going unfilled today, it's web application programmers, machine learning, and IT people. So believe it or not, IT is not a dying industry, it's just getting more complicated.
Question? Laura?
So one thing that enters my mind is the work that you started doing. A lot of people traditionally would have said, oh, that would be a nonprofit.
Mm-hmm.
But you're a regular for-profit, right?
Yes.
So anyway, I don't know that there's an answer for that, but that's just, I see people who want to do similar things to what you're doing, but they're approaching it from a nonprofit standpoint.
Yep.
So I wondered if you had some advice for why you should go after it as a for-profit.
Super good question, maybe a simpler answer than you're expecting. So when we definitely have like this social mission at the heart of everything that we do. It's really about justice for us. It's about like equal opportunity, equity, all of those kinds of things. But the reason that we're not a nonprofit is because we believe deep in our bones that you have to build something that will sustain itself, right? And so if you're always chasing after the nonprofit dollar, sometimes you get lost in the goals of other people. Whereas when you're a for-profit, you have your own goals, you have your own stake in the ground, and you're raising money for that goal. And so it's sort of turning the missional side of it on its head and saying, yeah, we want to do this, but we want to go so big and so deep in it that it has to sustain itself, and that you make decisions very, very differently when you know that has to be true.
Okay, I just have a comment. I'm a former principal, a turnaround principal, and it's...
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I think you're probably the same.
But it's been 25 years of grind, and I know 15 years ago I was telling kids, we don't even know what we're educating you for, what kind of jobs. So as I came back, I was in Arizona for a while and came back to California. I kept hearing about something happening in Fresno. I'm a researcher now and work as among my other jobs. because I'm Mexican too. I'm a professor at Sac State in the Continuing College of Education, and we keep hearing about these outlier schools in Fresno and in the county, and I'm looking at all the research and I'm thinking, what is going on? And I finally realized what's going on, and I'm really excited. I'm very pleased to hear about your company. I know that some of those software classes that I'm hearing about must be yours. And talk about social justice, you are making a huge impact. I applaud you, and that kind of a job, I mean, you have to make money. You have to make money, and come to Sacramento, you'd be surprised at the need there is. I grew up in Del Paso Heights, it has not changed like we needed to change. There's a tremendous amount of poverty, and there's so many kids with so much to give, and West Sac needs you too. Roger Boy here, we're talking about, we're trying to open a little, this thing, but we're talking about little tiny little food trucks, stuff like that, but what you're doing is changing lives, and I really applaud you.
Thank you so much, thank you for that. Mother Teresa, I don't know if you all are familiar with that person, but Mother Teresa, she had the saying, somebody once asked her, like, well, when does it stop? Right? When do you know that you've done your job? And her response to that was, well, if there are poor people on the moon, then we'll go there too. And that's how I feel about Bitwise. I think we have to do what's in front of us, and I think we have to achieve the goals that we set, but I don't see an end. I don't know where we would actually stop, because I think that you're right. There are people who are not being invited to the most exciting segments of our economy all over the United States.
Irma, my name is Dolores, and I wanted a couple things. One is, one of the problems that I see with startup community, and I don't have a long history in the startup community, but one thing that I've come to know is that people of color are not represented very well. Sacramento, not very well.
Yes.
I would imagine there are other parts where there's none of us. And I want to, so I applaud you. I mean, I really think that, this is the first startup grant I've come to. And I specifically wanted to come because I wanted to meet you. Because of the fact that you are someone that I can look to, and look at, like, wow, there's somebody that looks like me that is doing some amazing things and raising venture capital. The question that I have is, one of the things that people always, when I first started, people said, oh, you have to raise money from friends and family. And I was like, I don't know any friends or family that have any money to speak of that are gonna plunk down a $20,000 check. I just don't know people like that. And I think that it sometimes does a disservice to our community when we say that to people, because then you just go, okay, well, I'm gonna go home because there's no, I don't have access to that capital.
Yep.
Please tell us how you, if people talk to you about that and how you dealt with it.
Boy, you have really, you get to see me get red hot in a second. So friends and family. So my statistics are a little bit out of date, but here's really what it is. 80% of American jobs are created by small businesses, which is surprising to most people because I think everybody thinks that everybody's employed by like Coke and Google. But that's not the case. 80% of American jobs are created by small businesses. Most small businesses are started with friends and family money. These are facts, right? You can go to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. You can find this information anywhere. If you look at the wealth disparity, in terms of where that friends and family money is coming, there are only a certain type of family in America who actually has the access to those resources, such that the statistics actually scare the shit out of me. It's something like a 200%, or excuse me, if the average wealth of typically a white American family is something in the $200,000 range, that's the access to capital that a person has. You might be able to call, an uncle and get that $20,000 check because of the resources that are available in that wealth. And you compare that to Black American families, we're talking about an order of magnitude difference, right? So we're talking about the average Black American family has something like less than $1,000 in familial wealth. right? So where the fuck is that friends and family money that is from? You know, like, I'm actually being serious. And here's the scariest part, is that if that family, if the average white American family stopped adding wealth to their families, and black American families continue to grow, it would take 200 years to catch up. What do you mean? Like, what does that mean? So if somebody wants to start a business, and you're asking for those first dollars, they're not gonna come from Uncle Joe, right? And so that's really, really hard to like wrap our heads around. That's nobody's fault in this room. Like, let me also be clear about that. I'm not pointing fingers at anybody who happens to be a different ethnicity than me. I'm saying the state of the United States of America is this. And so what are we gonna do about that, right? So it's gonna take the Irmas of the world who happen upon $27 million, and it took more work than that. I'm not making light of that. But what has to happen is that I have to find a way to share that wealth so that it's not as difficult for my community now to start a new business. And we're gonna have to make a bunch of micro bets in that way. And so when I think about the startup community and what it typically means to be a startup, it's the same thing as like the internship program in the United States. Free internships is just another way to keep poor people poor, right? Free internships, meaning unpaid internships, are an opportunity that a lot of people can't take because it means that you can't go and earn an hourly wage somewhere else, right? This is just one of many mechanisms that cause that disparity, such that without a paid internship, I can't build up enough money to start a business, to earn wealth, to create. Let's even forget about generational wealth. Let's just talk about your own agency, your own ability to choose whether or not the AC goes on today or the heater goes on in the winter. Let's keep it that simple. Where does that money actually come from? Where are people going to get it, right? There are some really fantastic angel investors, even here tonight, who are aware of this problem as a national issue. It's not just a Sacramento issue. And what we haven't decided yet as a startup community is how we're going to spread this opportunity. So one of our lead investors both of our lead investors are just amazing human beings, and I should really just give them a shout out from Kapor Capital out of Oakland, and then the New Voices Fund out of New York. Ended up being our co-leads in our round. New Voices Fund knows that the revolution has to be financed, right? And so these are an African American group who only invests in people of color. And so that they are working on changing the narrative about why some people can start businesses and some people can't. Kapor Capital out of Oakland also hugely invested in sort of the social justice angle to these things. Their mantra is that intelligence is equally spread, but opportunity is not, right? And so that we see again and again and again. So the long story short is that the state of the world is really, really hard. Like these are the facts of the case. And there isn't anybody in this room whose fault it actually is. But what it kind of does come down to is that being part of the startup community means that you have to be as invested in somebody else's success as you are in your own. And there isn't any other way that we're going to change the state of the world than that very thing right there.
Hi. I have two questions.
Sorry, I got on my soapbox. Lighten it up again in a minute with a joke, I don't know.
The first question is, when you raised $27 million, did you meet in revenue with your company or not?
Did I what?
Did you meet in revenue to show the investors? Were you making revenues?
Did you have revenue?
Yeah, so we were post-revenue. So typically when you raise a Series A, so I guess one of the things to
I have one more question.
Sure. One of the things to make clear is that our Series A is outsized, meaning it's a huge Series A by the state of, by all standards. Typically the Series A are in the 10, $11 million range, somewhere between $5 and $12 million is your usual Series A. So we more than doubled the typical size of the Series A, and a lot of that had to do with the fact that we were in the desert and nobody knew about us, and so we just kept building our business without telling anyone. So we were definitely post-revenue. We were already 5 years old by the time we started rounding up the cash, and we had bootstrapped our way to about $15 million top line revenue.
So what do you advise for a student who is on a student loan and has a some company where to get the license, it costs $1 million. Before making a single penny, it costs $1 million, and there's just to get the license from California or Sacramento County. So what do you advise on that one?
Which license are we talking about?
So it's a money transfer company.
Okay, all right.
So when I said million, it doesn't say a million, but the range is you have to have at least from $250,000 to $1 million. So the commission will be able to give you the license before you can make a single thing. There's a, application, there's a website, all that, that can be taken care of with less money, but getting a license, it costs, you have to have that credit on your back before they allow you, before they issue a license. What do you advise in terms of getting investors interested in your business? I know most of what I heard from companies, from investors, is you have to have a revenue before investor gets in. If there's there are a lot of people who have ideas, good ideas, there are ways that they can do, but for them to get into you have experience as hardship yourself, how hard it is to get in there. What do you advise in terms of getting into that door, or getting investors, or even banks? That would be another good idea because you're going to go under the debt. You want to do them, but the best way would be getting capital venture angel investors. Thank you.
Yeah, so basically the question is like, how do you prove that you're worthy of investment without making money?
Yes.
Right? So a couple of things. Something that we found out super early on is that the banks in Fresno weren't ready for us. They did not know what to do with us. We were super risky and two idiot kids that really thought we could take over the world, and so we were not bankable. So that's a common story in startups. This is not the same economy that exists in the Silicon Valley. So when people are always saying go to the Silicon Valley and that's where you raise money, there's a reason that people say that, is because the risk tolerance in the Silicon Valley for these sort of micro bets is much higher than it is in places like Sacramento and Fresno and other non-primary markets. So that's the first thing, is that what you are finding here, you may not find the same resistance in another place to make that bet on you, right? And the second thing, it requires a ton of travel. I'm not saying it doesn't come without a cost, but the willingness to make those bets is really, really different in different markets. And so test the market is what I'm saying. The second thing is, so that's banks. The second thing is that there are venture capitalists at different stages that may be willing to make a smaller bet on you before you go and ask for the really giant check, right? And so that's something that I wish we had known before we went out and raised, is that there were other stages prior to bootstrapping to $15 million, which is a super painful thing to do, where we could have raised money in these sort of smaller increments and then invited sort of into the Mickey Mouse Club before we went out and raised this huge, huge Series A, right? So not only would we have been networked in the area, but then we would have had this track record of taking somebody's money and making good on it, taking a little bit more money and making good on it, right? And so I would say rewind the tape a little bit, see if there's a pre-seed fund or an angel fund that might take that bet. Don't just look in the region, look elsewhere. Also, there are places that will do sort of risky things, and start there rather than trying to raise the $1 million, $5 million, $10 million check.
Thank you.
Sure. I didn't know any of that shit 2 years ago.
Hi.
Hi.
So we've been talking a lot about how much you've had stacked against you, and the coolest part is that you did it. You did do it, and you bootstrapped to that point. And I would love to hear about how you did do it. I would love to hear about the 14 companies that came before, and the very first stages of it, and how you made it happen from the very beginning.
Yeah, super great question. I just need to make sure my fire's on.
That's all.
I still feel good about this. So I think that there's the how do I want to put this? There's the glamorous way that businesses are typically built. And you see that a lot in movies, young, strapping kid out of Stanford goes and raises a bunch of money, only has an idea and a sketchbook, and somebody makes a huge bet and then he turns that into $1 gajillion. That, I think, that's the Hollywood version of the story. And truth be told, that actually does happen, right? So that's another thing that was brand new information to me, is that the story that they tell in Hollywood actually does happen in places like Boston and Portland and the Silicon Valley. It doesn't happen in places like Fresno, right? And I'm gonna wager that doesn't happen that often in places like Sacramento either, right? So how do businesses truly get built? It's not sexy like at all. Like it's not glamorous at all. Our business was not sexy or glamorous on day one. All 3 lines of business for us existed on the very first day of opening our doors. And here's how it actually went down. There was a building that had been sitting empty for about 45 years that was owned by this older gentleman in town. And by now I had built this reputation in the Central Valley for being a technologist, and I had started a competition called 59 Days of Code, and it turned into a nonprofit, and I had started another software company that was like ramen profitable at best, meaning that we had enough money at the end of the month to buy ramen. Nutrition, you guys, means it's important, is what I'm saying. So I had developed this reputation, and this guy with this building that had sat empty for like 45 years tracks me down on the internet, and he's like, so I have this empty building, and I'm really interested in what you're doing in the technology industry in Fresno. Like maybe you want an office out of my building. Like maybe you want to like come and get some tables and chairs and work out of my building. And I was like, that's dope. Yeah, I totally want to come see this building. And I walk in, and it's like something you see out of like a horror film. I'm like, holy crap! Like, was I invited to office out of here, or did I come here to die? And no, it wasn't that bad. I love to exaggerate, but super, super nice guy. Owned this building. He comes from like sort of older money, if you will, and he gets so excited about me talking about what we're going to be working on. And he's like, well, why don't you just take a key to my building? And like, I'm gonna keep owning it, but you can use it if you've got some like pals in the technology industry that you want to like pal around with in my building. And I'm like, well, do you mind if I paint this wall like bright green and hang a TV over there? And he's like, nah, go ahead. And that's how we came across our first building. It's like we just slowly like took it over a little bit at a time. Like, and we paid him rent and everything, you know what I mean? But like, I didn't buy a building. I didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. I was gonna buy a building, right? But what I did have at that time was a bunch of pals in the technology industry that I wanted to pal around with, who liked bright green walls and televisions. And so I recruited them to come and like take up residence in our building. I'm like, you pay this guy rent, we get to party together all the time. And that was 5,000 square feet. That was our very first building. We filled it up in like a weekend. We did all the painting ourselves. We hung all the TVs that were mostly borrowed from like aunts and uncles who didn't want us, you know, like the big tube TV anymore. Yeah, and that's how we made it work for our first building. And then, the very first class we taught, again, all 3 lines of our business existed on day one. The very first class we taught was literally on plastic tables and chairs. My co-founder sold the seats, meaning like promoted the class. I taught it. I haven't written code in a while. But I taught the class, and it was mostly like friends and family that took the first class. Like, you know, we probably had a few strangers in there, but like of the 15 or 20 people that were in there, we probably knew 12 of them. Like, personally, knew 12 of them. Similarly, the first website we ever sold as a custom software development project was like my co-founder's church, right? And then he sold it, and I built it. And that was like the very first revenue that we got. We were just like, every favor we could call in, all of our pals, like bring your business, like we're just gonna pal around together and see if we can make it. Now, to go to one of the things that I think a lot of startups really need to recognize is that first customer, we like to call them drug deals, maybe you shouldn't, because it's like the first one's free, you know? That's on tape, right?
Oh yeah.
Tape? Anyway, yeah, Donahue, right?
Donahue, yeah.
So,
I'm old.
what a lot of startup founders I think miss is that your first drug deal or your first deal, whatever it is that you're doing, is going to come from somebody that you know, right? And that's not a bad thing. You may not even charge them for it. But what that gives you is the ability to say to your next customer, let me put you in touch with somebody who uses my product or service. They are amazed by it. It's changed their lives. And that's how you get customer number 2. And on until you raise $27 million.
So going a little bit away from building a startup and looking at having an impact on a community. And I agree that Sacramento has some, it's not a, what do you guys call underdog? It's not really an underdog city. Maybe it's a middle dog city, but from what you know of Sacramento and what you've done in Fresno, what are one or two things, programs you think that we could start here that would help train a better tech force, especially getting out to people who, you don't see it so much in the city, but my sister-in-law came here from Mexico and has picked fruit her entire life, and first child just got out of college and is a teacher now. But how do we reach those people whose parents have those kinds of jobs so that they'll know that something else is out there? And maybe we're just getting to them after they get out of high school. I'm not sure if you do any programs with kids or not, but what are a couple of things that we could do here that could build that workforce from people who have not had exposure to technology?
Yeah, super good question. So we do run, we actually call them exposure programs because we don't expect somebody in the 4th or 5th grade to choose their careers, right? Like that's not a reasonable thing to ask a 9 or 10-year-old. It's like, what are you gonna do for the rest of your life? I don't know, here's a robot, build it. Like, that's not the way that it works, right? So we call them exposure programs because if they're exposed to it, then it becomes a possibility. Very analogous to, in my life story, I didn't see any of that, so technology wasn't a possibility, right? That didn't enter my mind, not for one single minute, that one day I would start a company and build it to this size and go network and one day speak in front of you all. Not for 1 minute, right? So if you can expose people, young people, at a relatively early age, even if they don't gravitate toward it, then it becomes a possibility in their minds, right? At least it gets added to the quiver of arrows that they might choose from later on, right? So that actually is important. I would say this though about like what I have observed this area might need, and I think it's not your traditional answer. So there are two things. The first one is that the number of examples that you have to hold up, like as a community, banding together to hold up those success stories and making them important to other people who are not in the technology industry is how you will win the attention to the technology industry to get that sort of those set of outside resources that maybe don't exist here yet, right? So like if I were to go around the room right now and ask each of you, tell me about a success story in the technology industry right damn now, I wouldn't get the same answer, right? I wouldn't get the same. But if we can have this conversation together and we just spend 1 hour workshopping this and come up with the same 3 that we all say over and over again, and we evangelize on their behalves, right? Now I'm starting to get this marketing message out there that these cool things are happening here in Sacramento or in Greater Sacramento. And that's a really, really big deal. So it's more marketing than it is truth, right? You're taking the story, you're telling it to other people, and you're getting them to care about it. So that's one. And it's not your usual answer, but like the story you tell about yourself is more important than what is actually happening on the ground. That's one. The second one is that if you want to have more people of color or more folks from underrepresented populations participate in the technology industry, you have to stack the deck. Meaning you have got to find the 1 and 2 models that you can hold up and say, but she made it, or he made it, this Mexican American made it, this trans person made it, this, like whatever it is, whatever people group that you're most interested in serving, finding those people and making an example out of them, making them feel comfortable in front of rooms so they can tell their story, will recruit more people like them to the industry. In the same way that tonight, all of these first-time people have come out of the woodwork to attend Startup Grind, and let's be honest, largely because I'm female, or because I'm, brown, or because I have purple hair, or because I'm part of the LGBTQ community, something in that is resonating with you, and you're saying, that's a little bit like me. Maybe not exactly. You might not have purple hair, right? Maybe not exactly like me, but a little bit like me, just enough so that you want to hear my story. Right? And so that's what you want to do, is stack the deck so that more people feel comfortable, more people who look like me or who look like you are comfortable telling their story in these rooms. That's the job of the community, right? And so those are the things I think that you could do, any community you can do right away to sort of change the narrative and the way that we talk about ourselves.
Hi, my name's Arlene Mendoza. Hi. And I'm really happy that you're here, and I came because you're brown and you're Latina. And I come from a migrant family, also strawberries, Fields, Watsonville, but then I went to Cal Poly and got my undergrad in mechanical engineering. And now I've always wanted to understand how you overcame the limiting beliefs, the insecurity, because I've carried that today, up until today, through college, through corporate, through a lot of different meetings. And I just fought through it, but I got tired.
Yeah.
So I'm curious from your perspective how you managed to navigate those little fear monkeys in your mind to then be exactly where you are.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that there are two parts to it. So the first thing is, and everybody I think in this room is going to share a little bit of this if you're an entrepreneur, and that is that like, to do something from nothing, or to do something from scratch, you have to be a little bit delusional, right? You have to believe that you can make it work against all the odds. You have to believe that that's true. So that's part of it, is I'm a little bit delusional. But I think the other part of it is much more like, I don't know how to say this, but like, you know, it's more about therapy than it is anything. And that like, I have to really look at myself in the mirror and ask myself who I'm going to be. What kind of person am I going to be when I earn money? What kind of person am I going to be when I'm a CEO? What kind of person am I going to be when you're in the newspaper and you're on Forbes and Bloomberg and all of these other things? Like, who are you in that moment, in that space? And I think that to overcome the doubt for me, I had to recognize a long time ago that it actually has nothing to do with me. And it has everything to do with the people who might be inspired by this story. So I don't get up here to tell you any of these stories so that I can go home feeling like I was funny or important. It's so that somebody in the room hears what's been said and says, like, maybe that's me too. And so that's what is the driving factor for me, is that like I don't need more delusion. I could use more confidence always. But what I will get up for every single day is the possibility that somebody else's life might be changed.
Okay, this is the last question.
Over your journey of developing Bitwise, you've probably come across a lot of highs and lows. And what were some of what was your biggest failure, actually? Because everybody loves talking about the success, but what was your biggest failure, and what did you learn from it?
Well, I got told no about 1,000 times before we raised the money. So that very much feels like a failure in the moment, right? It's part of the story now, so it's easy to tell. But in the moment, like when you think that you're giving it your best and you're compelling people to believe in what you believe in, and you're like, and all it's going to take is this low investment of a couple $1 million, and they're like, get out, you know, that doesn't feel great. So I would say like there are those moments all the time, all over the place. But there's some really like public failures that we went through as well. Like the first building that we sort of acquired was, like I said, through like a friend kind of thing. We didn't own it, but like we could leverage that now to jump into the next thing. We made this huge announcement that we're going to move into this 150,000 square foot building. And we'd signed a bunch of tenants, and we were in escrow, and we were going to close any day now. We had gone super public with it. And then that entire deal crashed and burned. And it was like a spectacular failure. But and two, like, let me just contextualize this for you for a second, that like people were already skeptical that we were about what we said we were about, right? We're relatively new. I've got purple hair and tattoos. My co-founder was an attorney who quit so he could come do this. So we're just like this. We are from the island of misfit toys, and we make this huge announcement, and it falls through, and people are like, see, told you, like, this is a great reason not to believe in those idiots, right? And like, that was awful, and we recovered from it, but like, those public failures are actually not the ones that suck so bad, like, if I'm being honest. It's the ones that like you end up not being able to talk about, like, in most circles. And as entrepreneurs, I feel comfortable sharing this with you, but it's super, super scary when you think you're not going to make payroll. Yeah. Like, it is an awful moment in your life. Or when you don't, and you have to ask, could you hold your check for like a day and a half? Like, I just need this other payment to come through so that your check will clear. Those failures, we don't talk about that shit enough. And it really does take a toll on you, and it makes you feel like a failure. Like, you make one contract with a person. You only have one moral obligation as an employer, and that's to make payroll. And when you don't, you're like, I might not have what it takes to do this. Like, and so those things do happen, and when you don't have like the network of people you can rely on to be like, hey, can you cover, this check so that I can make payroll? like you feel like you like twice the failure even then, because now the people that you're asking are saying no because they can't help you, right? And so, like the story of Bitwise, and even before Bitwise, into the 10 years it took to arrive at Bitwise, like my story is fraught with those things, where super public failures, you would think that that would be enough to stop somebody, but what really keeps you up at night is those smaller things that we don't talk enough about, because sometimes it's just about meeting the agreements that you make with people that you ask to trust you.
All right, so final question. You know, it sounds like I'm a geek, and I am. Who's your favorite superhero or hero?
I don't like it. I can't choose one.
None?
I mean, there's a rumor that I was bit by a spider. Yeah. Choose anyone from the Marvel universe.
Go ahead.
No, I'm saying.
All right.
Those are my favorites.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you're actually kind of a hero here. And so we have to make game for you. And I have to say thank you for coming all the way from Fresno.
I'm like a little karate lady. I'm not athletic at all.
It's digital, it's awesome. And thank you for coming here. Thank you. And I have to admit, I actually had to pull back a couple of years, but I did see the inspiration you inspired. And so thank you for coming here and spending and sharing your story with us.
Rich, you're amazing. Thank you for having me.